जय श्री राधे। श्री वल्लभाधीश की जय। सभी वैष्णवन को हार्दिक सप्रेम सादर जय श्री कृष्ण. Today is day 72 of the readings, Varta number 63, the story of Suthar, a carpenter from Adel. Can you hear it? In the eternal Leela, he is Sri Dharma, a very close Sakha of Sri Thakurji. He experiences the pastimes between Sri Swaminiji and Sri Damodarji. Sri Dharma is actually Sri Swaminji's brother, who is very, very close to the Lord. He helped the Lord in his pastimes. One day during their play, Sri Dharma climbed up on Sri Thakurji's shoulders, which annoyed Sri Swaminiji, even though Sri Thakurji tried to persuade her otherwise. In the Sri Subodhaniji, Sri Acharyaji has explained that Sri Dharma's form is that of the Sri Thakurji's flower garland, which is always around his neck. Sri Swaminiji was nevertheless still peeved, and so she sent Sri Dharma to be born on earth. He was born as a carpenter in Adel. When he reached the age of 23, he caught sight of Sri Acharyaji and became very attached to him. He bowed down low to Sri Acharyaji and supplicated that he take him into his shelter. Sri Acharyaji asked him how he thought he could possibly fulfill all the requirements of a disciple of the path of grace, mainly because of his family's eating and drinking habits. The carpenter said, "O Maharaj, what do I have of a home? I will sit near you and just have your sight. I cannot bear to be away from you even for a single second." Sri Acharyaji told him to go and bathe in Sri Yamunaji. He did so, and then Sri Acharyaji initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandha. Part 1. The carpenter was completely addicted to Sri Acharyaji's form. He sat down close to him all the time. His family members began to suffer a great lack of food. All his family, including his wife and mother, came to Sri Acharyaji's mother and complained that the carpenter spent all day and night close to Sri Acharyaji, and so they had nothing to eat. They asked her to explain this to Sri Acharyaji. Ilama Guruji asked her son why he sat so close to the carpenter when all his family was hungry. She told him to send him home. The carpenter said that he could not tolerate not being able to see Sri Acharyaji. Sri Acharyaji, however, told him that his mother was annoyed over this matter, therefore he should go home and do his usual work. "I will come to you," he promised. The carpenter bowed low to Sri Acharyaji, went home and went back to work. His mind was always with Sri Acharyaji, however, and he was always wondering when Sri Acharyaji would come there. Seeing his love and suffering in separation, Sri Acharyaji went there. The carpenter stopped work and sat in discussion with his guru. They spent all their time thus. His family again came to Sri Acharyaji's mother and made the same complaint. Sri Acharyaji's mother asked him, "Why did you go to that carpenter's home? You should not go there." Sri Acharyaji replied that he would not go and sit there all the time. However, because of the love between them, he would often go to his house so that he might see him and they could discuss for a little while at least. Sri Acharyaji graced the carpenter in this way. Bhav Prakash. Sri Acharyaji accepted him into the path and let him sit next to him and enjoy his sight. However, one must experience the pangs of separation in order to better appreciate the love in one's heart for the Lord, and therefore he created the circumstance where the carpenter, because of his family's demands, had to go home and suffer separation. He was totally unable to tolerate this state of affairs, so Sri Acharyaji would make sure to spend some time in his company. The time was limited by the family's demands. It was time for Sri Acharyaji to leave on his Holy Grace pilgrimage, but he knew that the carpenter would become mad if he left him for such a long time. Therefore, even before he went, he was thus training the carpenter to be able to tolerate the situation, but also to have his sight in his very heart all the time. In Vraja, when Sri Thakurji appeared, he revealed his form to the gopis and then made them fall in love with him. They loved him so much that the amount of separation caused by the closing of their eyelids seemed to be like an age. He also used to go off into the forest with the cows, and the gopis could only get through their day by singing songs such as the Sri Venu Geet, the Song of the Flute, and the Yugal Geet, songs in pairs of verses, etc. They spent their whole day waiting for the evening, when he would come home again. When he went to stay in Mathura, he also created a situation of separation both day and night. The gopis then were comforted by the thought that Mathura was not so far away, and he could return at any moment. When he left to make his pastimes in Dwarka, he left these gopis in total separation, but day and night they were able to enjoy the bliss of his form. In this very way, Sri Acharyaji threw the carpet into the state of separation, but let him see his form in his inner heart. The carpenter no longer needed to look outside of himself, but was absorbed in the vision within his heart while he stayed at home. Thereafter, Sri Acharyaji again set off on his holy grace pilgrimage. The carpenter was thus an accomplished Vaishnava and the recipient of great grace from Sri Acharyaji. Actually, his story is indescribable, and so much of it remains hidden. Thus concludes Varta 63, the story of the carpenter from Adel, although there is much more to tell. Varta 64, the story of one Kshatriya man who lived in the east 4 camps away from Patna, and his companion, an adherent to another path. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, the Kshatriya is in the Kumarika group of gopis, and his name is Mohani. His companion, the adherent to another path, is Mohani's Sakhi named Lakshani. He was born into a Gauda Brahmin family in the east, while Mohani was born into a Kshatriya family. Both of them reached the age of 8 and they began to go to see one Panditji for their schooling. They have a connection from the Leela, and here they become very good friends. When they were both 15, they once saw Sri Acharyaji whilst he was on his way to Sri Jagannath Puriji. He had made camp in their village. The Kshatriya's father suggested that they accompany him to go and have the sight of Sri Jagannathji. He and his son set off together with Sri Acharyaji. His friend stayed at home. After some time, Sri Acharyaji reached Sri Jagannath Puri. There were many impersonalist philosophers gathered there. Sri Acharyaji defeated all of them in debate. The son of the Kshatriya told his father that it would be a good idea for them to become his disciples. However, his father said that he just wanted to die under the wheels of Sri Jagannathji's chariot, but that he could do whatever he wanted. His son asked him, "Why on earth do you want to just die like that? It would be much better to become Sri Acharyaji's disciple and always remember the Lord's name and serve him." The father said it was too old, that he was incapable of such, and that he really wanted to die under the chariot. The son kept quiet. 10 days later was the Ratha Yatra, when Sri Jagannathji comes out of the temple and sits in the chariot. The father threw himself under the chariot wheels and was crushed to death. The son went to Sri Acharyaji and told him about his father. He asked him what would be the result of his father's death in this manner. Sri Acharyaji simply stated, "What is the use of dying before you have attained the Lord? After death, one goes to the place where one's mind was at the moment of death. However, your father was wishing for some comfort, and therefore he has gone to heaven. He will enjoy there for some time and then fall back down. You, on the contrary, are a divine soul. He will attain liberation simply because of his association with you." The boy then requested Sri Acharyaji to give him some service. Sri Acharyaji said that at the moment he was in the Sutaka state of impurity because of the recent death of his father, but that he would initiate him when that state lifted. When the required number of days had passed, the Kshatriya approached Sri Acharyaji and, after bowing, asked him to accept him. He told the Kshatriya to go and bathe, and when he came back, Sri Acharyaji initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. The Krishna saw a lovely Swarupa of child Krishna somewhere for sale, and so he bought it. Sri Acharyaji bathed the Swarupa in the 5 nectars and gave him into the Kshatriya's responsibility. He stayed there with Sri Acharyaji for 2 days and learnt the ways of Seva in the path of grace, and then asked Sri Acharyaji to tell him what to do next. Sri Acharyaji told him to set up his Seva at home, and he did so in a very fine manner. Soon thereafter he began to experience Sri Thakurji's personal contact. His friend the Brahmin, who adhered to another path, used to serve his own Thakurji according to the path of lawful limitations, but he had a lot of natural affection for the Lord. By the power of his shelter, and Sri Acharyaji and the Kshatriya came to know that the Brahmin was a divine soul, and thought it would be nice if he could somehow get him to come to the path of grace. One day he spoke up and said it would be good if he became Sri Mahaprabhuji's disciple. The Brahmin said, But I am already initiated into another path, so how can I become a Vaishnava? The Kshatriya said nothing. He was sad that his friend was a divine soul but might not get initiated as a Vaishnava. Thinking in this way, he went home. It was time to make the afternoon seva. Sri Acharyaji spoke to him, saying, "Do not worry, he will become a disciple on the path of grace." The Kshatriya asked him how, when he had already suggested it and he had refused. Sri Thakurji said it was his own wish for the Brahmin to come into his seva, and therefore he would be able to make this happen in a single second. Sri Thakurji said, "Do one thing. Go to his house, cook, offer the bhoga to his Sri Thakurji, and afterwards partake of the Mahaprasad." The Kshatriya asked how it would be appropriate for him to make offerings to the Brahmin Sri Thakurji, and how he could eat the prasad of that deity. This would deny the principles of the path of grace, he thought. Sri Thakurji told him, "Don't worry, it is my wish, and this will not obstruct your seva. The bhoga that you offer there I will personally come and partake, so you may also have the prasad." In this way, he will become a Vaishnava. Part 1. One cold day, the Kshatriya Vaishnava got up early and completed his seva up to the afternoon rest period. Then he went over to his friend's house. The adherent to another path insisted that the Kshatriya cook there. Bhav Prakash. The Kshatriya Vaishnava was very happy that his friend would soon become a Vaishnava. He thought about the Lord's wish and cooked lots of nice anasakari dishes. Sri Thakurji had in fact told him to cook all types of offerings, and including sakari, but he stuck to just the anasakari preparations to stay within the boundaries of the path of grace. Part 1 continued. He cooked the anasakari preparations and offered them to his friends. Sri Thakurji, on the honour of Sri Acharyaji, whilst also requesting Sri Govardhandara to accept the offerings and make his friend into a Vaishnava. Sri Govardhandara came there and partook of the offerings, then left. Then the Kshatriya left the Mahaprasad to the Brahmin. When the Kshatriya Vaishnav had his prasad, he went home. In the afternoon he bathed and started the seva. The Brahmin had his Mahaprasad and went to sleep. That Brahmin's Sri Thakurji was called into the Swarupa through mantras and then dismissed according to the rituals of his path. But Sri Thakurji arranged for this partial manifestation to say to the Brahmin adherent of that path, "Today I am hungry." The Brahmin woke up and said, "How can you be hungry? Sri Acharyaji's disciple came here and made the offerings. Why did you not accept those offerings?" The partial manifestation replied, "When the Vaishnava made the offerings, he thought about Sri Govardhandara, and he came there and ate all of them. I am only a partial power. The Supreme Lord of all came there and partook, so I had no chance. I only enter when called upon by mantras, and then I can accept the offerings from within the deity form, and then I leave when I am released from the form. That is how our path functions. The Supreme Lord is not dependent on any mantra, only on the love of the devotee. The Kshatriya has so much love for that the Supreme Lord comes there to taste his offerings. I cannot go where the Supreme Lord is." The Brahmin lit incense and performed the waving of light ceremony, and then went over to see the Kshatriya Vaishnava. He said, "I was a fool not to accept the idea of becoming a Vaishnava when you suggested it to me. Now please help me to become a Vaishnava of the path of grace. You cooked at my house today, and the Supreme Lord of all came there to eat. I think your Vaishnava ways are the most superior." The Kshatriya Vaishnava told him that Sri Acharyaji was travelling from Varanasi to Sri Jagannath Puri. He will be here in 5 to 7 days. At that time you can become a Vaishnava servant of the Lord. I did tell you before, but you did not listen. Now the Lord has personally blessed you. Bhav Prakash. From this we learn that the Lord will certainly eke out a way to bless whomsoever he has decided to grace. If a Vaishnava helps you to find acceptance into the path, then that is great grace. If an accomplished Vaishnava accepts you, then know this to be the Lord's own act. The association of great Vaishnavas can fulfill everything. This principle becomes clear through these events. Part 1 continued. When Sri Acharyaji arrived there, he stayed in the Kshatriya Vaishnava's home who told the Brahmin that Sri Mahaprabhuji was there. So he immediately came there and bowed low to him. He begged him to accept him into his shelter. He invited Sri Acharyaji to his home, and after going there, Sri Acharyaji initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. He also initiated all the other family members with the Lord's name. He bathed his Sri Thakurji with the 5 nectars and established him on the throne of that house. He cooked, offered to the Sri Thakurji, and then partook of the Mahaprasad. He let the Brahmin eat his leftover prasad and then set off again towards Sri Jagannath Puri. Due to the association of that Kshatriya Vaishnava, the adherent to another path became a Vaishnava on the path of grace. That Kshatriya Vaishnava was thus a great Vaishnava and a recipient of the Lord's great grace. Bhav Prakash. Satsang is an immense blessing and only comes about through such grace. Thus concludes Varta 64, the story of the Kshatriya and the adherent to another path, both from the east, near Patna. Thus concludes the reading for today. We continue tomorrow with Varta 65. Sabhi Vaishnavana ko Jai Shri Krishna. Aaj ke Anand ki Jai. Shri Giriraj Dhanana ki Jai ho. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.